Welcome to Aviation News Talk. Coming up on today's program, a Newsmakers episode where we interview people in aviation who are making the news. This week, United Airlines is in the news for the PR disaster they created on the ground at the Chicago O'Hare Airport when they dragged a passenger off of a plane to make room for airline employees who needed to get to Louisville, Kentucky to crew a flight the next day. In the aftermath, FlyOtto, an on-demand air charter service, has made an interesting offer to United Airlines. And today our guest is Rod Rakic, founder of FlyOtto. All this and more, and the news starts now. Welcome to Aviation News Talk, where we talk about general aviation. I'm Max Trescott. If you enjoy the show, please tell your friends. So, Rod, for the two people who are in the world who haven't heard about the United incident, tell us a little bit about what happened in Chicago on Sunday.
Well, Max, I wasn't there, so I've been following this in the news like everyone else has. And really what happened was really a series of unfortunate events. My friend John Ostrar from CNN said that you have to look at this like a aviation accident. The holes in the Swiss cheese all lined up. And what it ended up happening was a passenger who was boarded onto a flight from Chicago to Louisville ended up being dragged off physically and hurt pretty badly in the process from the airplane. And it's still really sketchy in terms of who knew what when. It's pretty obvious that everyone involved was probably doing what they thought was the right thing, from the gate agent who, after the plane was boarded, found that they had four members of the regional airline flying under the United flag who needed to go to Louisville, and they were going to have to cancel a flight the next day. So the airline made the decision if they're going to inconvenience four people or inconvenience an entire flight of people who are going to lose their flight the next day, they asked for volunteers to deplane the flight. No one took them up on the option of taking a voucher or taking compensation, and so they had the computer actually randomly select four passengers. One of those passengers was a doctor who decided he wasn't going to take the offer. He refused the order to leave the aircraft, and then things escalated from there. Finally, he ended up getting beaten up pretty badly by the Chicago aviation security person who was called to remove him from the aircraft and dragged off the airplane. And again, I'm just looking at this from video that was posted online and then the news stories. But that seems to be the synopsis of what happened. And obviously it has continued to snowball, not only for United Airlines, but really for the airline industry overall. Is just, some really bad news.
And you mentioned earlier that you thought the people were following the policies, and I think that's probably part of the problem. The policies led people to a series of really bad decisions. Let's talk about the aftermath. So, what kinds of things did the CEO do immediately afterwards, and subsequently in the week that turned this what could have been a smaller problem into just a major disaster for United?
Well, I've been watching what Mr. Munoz has said, and again, only through the press. So I don't have any really firsthand knowledge of this. I haven't really spoken to anyone at United, but watching him sort of make statements, some of the statements that were inward facing, the statements that were made to the company, got released early on. And that was sort of this blanket generic statement about him supporting his team and the folks at the airline, which again, any CEO would want to support his team. But that then spawned a huge backlash from the traveling public. And so he first apologized. That apology was not met with a great response, and so there have been multiple apologies, kind of ramping up the apology every time. I think a lot of people who have a background in public relations and marketing and branding have been studying this. This is going to be a case study for a long, long time in how that first statement made to the public after something bad happens is so critical to get right, because you really don't get a second chance. And before you know it, you're on late night talk shows.
I wonder if Munoz really needed to change gears and didn't realize that at the time. I think he was brought into United, as he said, to help improve the morale. He's worked really hard to, make both the employees and the customers feel better about United and the services that they're providing. He said, "This is an upsetting event to all of us at United. I apologize for having to reaccommodate these customers." That was the first apology, not to the doctor, but to the people who were pulled off the flight. He also said that the passenger was disruptive and belligerent. So it sounds like he pretty much was listening to his lawyers rather than his PR professionals.
You can't be there for every incident when you're the CEO of a big company. So obviously he's getting counsel, and he was listening to folks who were what they probably thought was the correct response to the incident, and just people weren't buying it. They weren't buying the idea that any of that made up for the fact that this person who bought a ticket was seated on board an airplane and then was, beaten pretty badly. I guess it came out today that, he lost teeth. He has, damage to his sinuses. He's all alleged by his lawyer in a press conference today here in Chicago that he was concussed. This guy had to go to the hospital. And really, there's no video of what actually happened during the altercation. It's just the video, taken by people on the aircraft was sort of after the fact, and he was kind of being, dragged off the airplane unconsciously, and then he regained consciousness, I guess, and got back on the airplane bleeding. So again, crazy bonkers stuff altogether. And the CEO isn't there, but he's getting advice and counsel from people. I think a lot of people are, whether they're on Twitter or Facebook, are giving him a lot of advice and counsel. Here we are sort of talking about the incident, and he just really didn't resonate with people. People did not feel like the airline really cared about its customers. And that is the bigger issue. And this is why I think this has become a much bigger story, is that the reality is it feels to a lot of people like the airlines just don't care. It's built into their business model. It's built into how they treat their customers. Again, the 4 people who were on an airplane who had purchased their ticket, had been boarded. They weren't denied boarding. That's a different set of rules. The rules here are actually under what's called denial of transport, refusal of transport. And you look at this massive contract for carriage that United has, and nowhere in that contract could I find something that sort of met this standard. So it's all sort of a gray area, and lawyers and PR professionals will debate this for a really long time, because again, the holes in the Swiss cheese all aligned. There wasn't necessarily a single point of failure. Everyone felt like they were doing the right thing. And the way the industry works is being sort of called into question in how they treat passengers. If you look at the hub and spoke model that the airlines use to drive down the cost of our airline tickets, it's they got the idea from FedEx. The hub and spoke model really was designed to drive efficiencies to move packages from point A to point B as efficiently, as less expensively as possible, which is great if you're a package. It's not so great if you're a person.
Oh boy, that's a really, and I'm sure there are a lot of airline passengers who feel like packages. And you're right. I think this kind of happened at a time when people in general just aren't thrilled with the airlines at all, and so it kind of blew up. Well, I think Munoz really started getting better advice. 2 days later, when he made a better statement that was better accepted. He said, "We're not going to put a law enforcement official to remove onto an aircraft to remove a book paid seated passenger in the future." He actually finally apologized to Dr. David Dow and his family. He said that this is not who our family at United is. You saw us at a bad moment. This can and will never happen again at United Airlines. That is my promise. Well, he has certainly started doing the right thing, though I think a lot of people will question why it took him so long to get to that point. But our show here is about general aviation. I wanted to talk a little bit about FlyOtto. Tell our listeners about FlyOtto. What do you do?
So FlyOtto is a platform that matches travelers with pilots and planes on demand. We built this from really our experience building and growing Open Airplane. So OpenAirplane.com, allows pilots to make renting an airplane as easy as renting a car. That over the last few years has given us the opportunity to grow a national network of flight schools and flying clubs. And now we have just over 15,000 pilots who are signed up to fly with Open Airplane. FlyOtto grew out of what we found in demand from the flight schools and aviation companies that we already had these partnerships with. I said, it's great that you're sending us pilots to rent our aircraft, but we have these aircraft that are also part of a charter company that's affiliated with our flight school or our flying club or something. And really what we were finding out was that, the way that the charter business worked wasn't really great for customers, and it wasn't really great for people in the aviation industry. So we took the same technology and quite honestly, the same business model of Open Airplane and launched FlyOtto in September of last year, so September of 2016. And what that is giving everybody else who doesn't have a pilot certificate, can't rent an airplane with Open Airplane, the same magic power that we have. Access to over the 5,000 public use airports that we have here in the United States, because there's only about 300 of them that the airlines will sell you a ticket to.
So obviously there have been some structural issues with hiring charter aircraft in the past, which created this opportunity. Tell me about how it happened in the old days prior to FlyOtto. If you and I wanted to fly from one point to another, how did we even figure out how to find a charter?
Well, most of the charter business is driven by brokers. These are middlemen who you contact and say, hey, I want to fly from point A to point B. I want to charter an airplane. And they have access to databases and they have relationships which allow them to go find you a charter company that will book you an airplane. And again, these are Part 135 charter companies are airlines. They're non-scheduled airlines. They have a lot of oversight from the FAA. They're very safe. They're a lot safer in terms of their statistical record than Part 91, private flying. And they're just airlines that don't know where they're going to go tomorrow. So they get the call from the broker and they're asked to give a quote. So every time someone wants to book a flight from San Carlos to Las Vegas, that charter company has to send a quote to the broker, and the broker collects a bunch of quotes. And then sometimes they'll even take the top few quotes and send it to everyone who offered them the quote and said, well, here are the quotes we have. Who's willing to sharpen the pencil and give this customer the best deal they can? I mean, it gets really that's bonkers to me. And then, so what it does is it creates a race to the bottom for charter operators, because they're really going to get beaten down on price. And eventually someone just makes the decision that they're willing to maybe lose money on a trip just to keep the airplane flying, right? And so it's really a negative pressure on the charter industry. It's kind of a crap way to do business. And then, of course, that experience of, I want to fly from San Carlos to Las Vegas. How much will that cost? What's available? How long will the flight take? Again, it takes, 4 hours on, typically to find out what that trip will cost you as a customer. That's terrible in terms of your experience. So we really designed FlyOtto to fix both sides of that by creating this online marketplace where customers find out immediately in real time how much would it cost to fly private from any of these 5,000 public use airports, how many seats are available, how long the trip will take, and get a retail price, not a quote, but a retail price. On the flip side, the charter operator, instead of dealing with a broker, gets a notification from the marketplace when someone has requested a trip. And in that notification, they know exactly what the itinerary is. They know exactly what their revenue for the trip will be. And they just simply have the decision of, do they want to accept the trip? If the plane's not available, or the pilot's not available, or we got the revenue numbers incorrect, then that's okay. They can decline the trip, and then we'll keep trying to make that match. But since we asked every operator that's in the FlyOtto network up front, what does it cost to fly your airplane? How much money do you want to make per nautical mile when that Cirrus SR-22 departs San Carlos and flies to Las Vegas? We do all that math in real time. Computers are good at that. We are able to say with pretty good certainty what the revenue should be for that flight, and the operator can just press a button, accept the trip in real time. And so now, instead of 4 hours or a day going by from someone requesting a charter flight to it being booked and confirmed, it can be mere minutes.
Wow, that really sounds like a huge advantage. I think about, we're all used to getting on Kayak or Expedia. You want to book a flight, boom, you get all that stuff instantly. The whole idea of having to wait 4 hours to find out how much it's going to cost while I'm trying to make other decisions about my trip, that just seems crazy in this day and age.
Well, and a lot of the charter operators will actually have a contact form on their website. It'll say, I'd like to fly to Las Vegas tomorrow, and it just emails the information to the charter operator. Well, the charter operator is doing a bunch of stuff, including answering the phones, getting back to emails, customizing these quotations, and then getting back to people. So even if you reach out to the charter operator, you may not get an answer right away. So it's not just a middleman problem. It's this issue that, ultimately FlyOtto is competing in some cases with a string on a wall and a map. And they just they pull the string out and they see how many inches of string they're going to use and say, this will be how much your charter flight will cost today.
That's great. And it's so funny because I have seen these maps on the wall with the string, but it hadn't occurred to me that they're being used for charter. Wow. Talk about kind of 19th or 20th century type techniques. All right. So I'm sitting here at your website, flyotto.com. Looks pretty simple. Right there at the very beginning, right there in the middle, it wants me to type in where I'd like to be picked up. It wants me to type in fly me to. So I just thought we would pick an example here that might be relevant for the news this week. Yeah. How about if I put in Chicago, Illinois, where we just talked about a rather interesting incident, and I'm going to put in Louisville, Kentucky. So I'm going to click search now here. I figure you're probably doing the same thing on that end over there.
Of course.
And boom, guess what? In the time that I was just talking there, I now have a map up at the top of the screen. And I've got a nice line that shows me a direct route from Chicago to Louisville. And so I also, below that, I have a section that says available trips. And there are a number of different aircraft. Let's start with the map up top here. I see that next to Chicago, there's a number 19, and next to Louisville, there's a number 16. What does that mean?
Well, one of the challenges we have is most people don't know where the general aviation airports are. If you ask someone how many airports are near Chicago, they'll typically say 2, Chicago Midway, Chicago O'Hare. The 19 is actually a cluster of general aviation airports that have facilities that can accommodate a charter airplane. So if you click on the number 19, you'll actually zoom the map in, and now you'll see some blue dots, you'll see some more clusters, you'll see some green dots. The blue dots are general aviation airports that you can get picked up at. We automatically picked Chicago Midway because the algorithm decided that was the easiest airport to fly you from the center of Chicago. So we're not even asking people for airport codes. You can use an airport card if you would like, but what we're doing is we're designing this experience for someone who doesn't understand general aviation. So the map is important because it gives them a visual guide to all the options. You could get picked up at Lansing Airport near Gary. You could get picked up out here if you might have typed in Chicago, but you actually live in Naperville, which is kind of a nice part of Illinois, and you think Chicago is your only option, but you don't think of DePage Airport, which is a great place to get picked up. Even if you really wanted to get picked up at O'Hare, our algorithm is smart enough to kind of avoid O'Hare as a choice because the landing fees are quite expensive. And for a lot less than a landing fee at O'Hare, you could Uber over to Schaumburg Airport and select that. So that is why we have this experience. The other thing is the green dots are where we have charter aircraft based that are in our network. So a lot of times if you click an airport that is a green dot, you can actually change your destination or your origin to that green dotted airport and save some money because now we don't have a reposition link. And so that's all done right here on this map interface. And anytime you make a change in the map, you click a different airport, you hit submit, it will actually recalculate the retail price and the flight time for you in real time down below.
That's excellent. Okay, good. So I'll just leave it here at Midway Airport. And as I scroll down here, I see like more than a dozen, in fact, close to 24 pretty pictures of aircraft. And next to each of one, it tells us what type aircraft it is. It has a price, and it says the number of passengers and the total number of time. So why don't you just go ahead and let's say we had, let's just start with 3 passengers. What are some of the kind of options and prices that people might have to fly 3 passengers one way from Chicago to Louisville? And then we'll step up to 4 passengers.
Okay, so we actually rank the results here in these search results by price. So the least expensive way for a one-way on-demand charter, where you tell us when you want a professional pilot and a Part 135 certified aircraft at the airport of your choice to pick you up and take you where you want to go. In this case, from Chicago to Louisville would be a Piper Arrow. It can seat 3 passengers, and you're booking the whole plane. The flight time would be 2 hours and 14 minutes. We've calculated that based on sort of the true airspeed of the aircraft and a little bit of wiggle room for ATC or winds. But for 2 hours and 14 minutes later, for $1,659, so $1,659, you'll be in Louisville. Now, the door-to-door time between leaving downtown Chicago and getting to Louisville, often, even in a piston single-engine airplane, we can typically, with trips that are under 500 miles, beat the airlines in door-to-door time. That's why, we who fly general aviation know that, it's a real superpower to have access to the airplanes. But you have to have a pilot's license in your pocket to be able to do that. And so this is for everybody else. This is for all the pilots out there who have been asked by a friend or a colleague, hey, will you fly me somewhere? And you do that shrug maneuver and you look down at your feet for a minute and then you explain that, you don't have the right kind of equipment for a trip like that, or you're not certified under charter. So then you get into this weird gray area, in terms of regulation. I'm sorry, I just can't help you. But now you have an option. You can say, go to flyotto.com and we'll give you the flight time and pricing and let you book that trip without even, making a phone call. You can do it on a smartphone. You can do it on a tablet. You can do it on a desktop computer. It all works the same. So the least expensive way to do it in terms of a charter isn't going to be a jet, which is what a broker would typically point you to. It's going to be in a Piper Arrow because that's a perfectly good way to get down there if you've got a couple hours and you don't want to spend tens of thousands of dollars.
All right, so $1,659 one way. I don't pay any more than that, right? In other words, the aircraft has to fly back to its home base, but I just pay the $1,659. They drop me off, and then they do what they need to do to get back home.
Yeah, we've recalculated the return trip, and so that's the retail price that includes the small revenue share that we keep, the price that the credit card gets, and the revenue for the flight to the operator. And that calculated from where that airplane is actually based, a pickup at Chicago Midway, a budget for fees and ramp fees and those kinds of things, and then handling fees and all that are all included. That's the price as a consumer you'll typically pay. The only time it would be more than that is something unusual and unforeseen happened. There's a hailstorm, and the operator has to pull the aircraft into a hangar, or they have to pay for de-ice or something like that. But you're now getting real-time retail pricing for aircraft charter, which typically isn't the way it worked.
Yeah. So if we were taking the Piper Arrow, we could think of ourselves as alternatively flying economy class, I would imagine. And you take that $1,600, divide by 3, and now you're looking at, a $550 ticket per person, something like that, which is probably not a huge premium compared to, what booking a ticket the last minute on that route would be. By the way, I love this one. I step down a little further. I can fly my favorite Cirrus SR-22T for not a whole lot more, $2,122. And there's some other Cirruses in there. And then we start moving up into some twin engine aircraft. We can get into a Cessna 414 for $2,900. By the way, only 2 minutes longer than I could do it in the Cirrus. So some of these aircraft are pretty fast. Now let's start to step up into places where we might carry 4 passengers or more. What would be the cost, and what kind of equipment would you find if you had to move, let's just hypothetically say, 4 airline employees from Chicago to Louisville who had to be there to crew a flight the next day?
Great example. So my pick for that, out of all the possible aircraft that are in our network right now, we have a turboprop powered Piper Meridian single engine prop jet for $2,930. And
Holy
that
shit.
Flight time would be 1 hour and 14 minutes. So a little over an hour. You've got a turboprop airplane, and you can put 4 passengers in it, and the cost of that would be less than what hypothetically United would have paid the passengers in terms of compensation for kicking them off the flight. By using FlyOtto, United could have actually saved money on this trip.
Yeah, I'm just kind of smiling when I look at the price. I hadn't looked at this before. $2,900. If I round that up to $3,000 and divide by 4, I'm looking at $750, which is actually less than the $800 they were offering passengers to get off the flight.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay. Now, if I called an airline broker and you said typically they'd be trying to put me in a King Air or a jet. Let's just say I really like King Airs and I really like jets. What's that going to cost me on the same route?
Same route. Again, you save 2 minutes in the King Air by having 2 turboprop engines, and $3,396 will get you there. But now you have room for up to 9 passengers.
So you've got just an amazing number of solutions to offer here. I really, really like this. So tell me, what was the offer that FlyOtto has made to United Airlines?
So we want to be part of the solution. We think that the aviation family needs to work together to sort of innovate our way out of this mess that we've created for ourselves. And so we made an offer, and we publicized it yesterday, that we'd like to offer United Airlines a free flight to reposition their crew the next time they have this kind of overcapacity situation. The next time they need to get a crew somewhere and they don't have the capacity on their own airline, or they can't deadhead on another airline like they typically would. And now, instead of making bad choices, let's make a choice that makes more sense. And so we want to demonstrate how FlyOtto unlocks mobility for people. And the best way to do that is to offer United Airlines, and this is a real offer, we're not kidding around here, that the next time this happens, for a trip up to 1,000 miles, we would like to be able to book them on a charter flight and get their crew to where they need to go.
Wow, that's amazing. That's a great offer. And that would be a crew of 4 or something like that? That's a typical crew for a regional flight, like what we saw to Louisville. We actually do book aircraft up to 9 seats on the FlyOtto network. So as long as it's a trip that you can find on the FlyOtto platform, it's under 1,000 miles, we would accommodate up to 9 crew members on a trip if that's what it took to demonstrate that
the 121 airlines can take advantage of all those public use airports that, and the general aviation capacity that we have to be able to leverage the Part 135 side of the business to help their business work better and better serve their customers.
I was thinking about this. I don't know that I've ever heard of an airline using a Part 135, operation to assist in any part of their business. I'm sure that's happened. My experience, or at least what I know, is that typically when airlines need to move people from point A to point B, they kind of think, well, hey, we're an airline. I guess we should move it on our airline or somebody else's airline. I don't know that I've ever heard of them saying, well, this was going to be more efficient for us to put them on to a King Air or to a charter. Do you know of any cases where airlines have chartered aircraft to move employees around?
None in particular, but I do know that they use car services all the time. So if you've got to move a crew from one airport to another, and they'll call them an Uber, and that again wasn't something that you did a few years ago. The idea of pushing a button on a phone and having a driver show up and take you to another airport was not something that people sort of understood or used, and now it happens all the time. And so we do know that it's not always going to be possible for the airline to put their crews on a available flight, because the airlines are like the railroads, right? They've got a schedule to keep, and there's only so many flights per day to so many locations, and they're very good at what they're good at. But then when something goes awry, like crews are out of position, maybe they got diverted somewhere because of weather, maybe flights got canceled, because of weather or scheduling or maintenance, all these kinds of things happen. And these guys and these folks, work really hard to try to make it all work. And so our perspective is if you can call a car service to drive a crew to where they need to go, that's great. But when the distance is simply too long to Uber somewhere, FlyOtto can be a really good solution.
So is it fair to say that FlyOtto is really the Uber of the air?
Well, I usually don't say that. We're very inspired by the on-demand economy. In fact, I'm going to be visiting with the folks at Uber in Dallas at a summit on on-demand air travel at the end of the month. We've got a lot of things in common in terms of our user experience. What we've been inspired by is that scheduled services like airlines don't always fit everybody's lifestyle. More people want what they want when they want it. They want to have more choice. And so what we did is we built FlyOtto to be an alternative. If a car service isn't a good fit because the trip is too long, if you're kind of faced with a 4 to 6 hour drive somewhere, as a pilot, the first thing that pops in my head is, well, I'll rent an airplane, and of course I'll do that on Open Airplane, and I'll fly somewhere. And then there are other trips where, maybe those are, trips that are a little too long for a service. So gosh, if I could only have something a little bit faster available to me. That's why we've got turboprops in the FlyOtto network, and we're now adding jets. We're actually actively looking to get more jets on the platform, and we're adding jets because what we found is that there is a demand for on-demand air travel on flights that are longer that are a good fit for piston and turboprop aircraft. And so I tell people all the time that when you think about FlyOtto, think about it anytime you're going to be spending 4 to 6 hours in the car, or you're taking a trip on a regional airline, maybe a trip of less than 1,000 miles, and that customer experience isn't going to be great because the airlines are cutting back on service for trips below 250 miles. And in the United States, about 50% of all business trips are 500 miles or less. So this is a really big problem that we're out to solve for people.
Well, I think there's a proposed cut in the budget which would eliminate the rural air service subsidies, which means that there are going to be hundreds of communities around the country that are going to be losing air service.
About 650,000 passengers a year travel on the Essential Air Service program. And this is a government subsidy to provide scheduled air airline service to communities that really don't have enough demand to support, a viable scheduled airline service. And this is a holdover from the Air Deregulation Act in 1978. When we deregulated the airlines and the government stopped deciding where the airlines could fly to and how often they could fly and how much they should charge, the flip side of that was the creation of this $160 million a year subsidy program. Well, if that subsidy program goes away, I'm sure most folks would just decide to drive or take a train or maybe a car service to a bigger city and a bigger commercial hub airport or something like that. But a lot of folks could replace traveling from these smaller, underserved markets with an on-demand service, and we hope that FlyOtto will be able to meet that demand.
That's great. So when United decides to take you up on your offer, or any of our listeners decide to use FlyOtto to charter an aircraft, how do they go about doing that? Where do they go?
We made it as easy as we could. There's nothing to download. There's no app to get from a store or anything like that. They go to flyotto.com, FLYOTTO.com, on any device, a smartphone, a tablet, a desktop computer, and they can do that search, find prices and flight times, and book a flight all online. You don't even have to create an account to be able to see pricing. You can book a round trip ticket if you'd like, and book the whole plane for even a round trip for up to 3 nights away, all on the platform, and get all that without having to pick up the phone and talk to a human. But then again, we're also very social. So you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We're happy to help people. Again, 80% of the people who have flown with us on FlyOtto since we launched in September have never flown private before. They're completely new to general aviation, and that is really an exciting thing for us.
All of this sounds extremely exciting to me. Rod, thank you so much for joining us today on our Newsmaker edition of Aviation News Talk.
Thanks, Max.